how the Biafran story has been making its way in snippets into public consciousness, a comment here, an anecdote there, the memory will be kept fresh because the effects of the Biafran War are still very much present today. Now, let's be clear. Every film does this, or every film should do this, because that's called your worldview or your value statement. We could all use a bit of grace. Lovers of African cinema, this is the channel where we love African movies and we review these movies from a place of love and just the desire for excellence. Welcome new and returning viewers. Please consider subscribing if you're not subscribed. It's nice here, I promise. Welcome also to this review of Uno, the F in family. This F, is it for fondness or fuckery? I guess it's a little bit of both, because family does have sometimes in equal measure fondness and fuckery. And I don't know if I'm going to be saying this right. Uno. I guess I should have found out exactly what this pronunciation is. It might be an Igbo word. And if it is, I apologize. So we're just going to go with Uno. All right. Uno has begun its theatrical release as from May 17th. So let's see about getting you to go see this film in the cinemas or not. I kid, I tease. All right, guys, please do me a favor. You're here, welcome, and thank you. Please like this video. Done? Thank you. Uno, the F in family, is written and directed by Ebuka Njoku. I didn't find an official synopsis for it. I guess I could have made the effort. I didn't. I'm sure I could have found it online somewhere. So I've written my own little, not quite a log line, more a bit of a summary. So let's go. Junior, a comic artist, returns home with his fiancée, but a homecoming is not always what it should be. His return causes upheavals that open up old wounds, bring secrets to light, and test the bonds of family. How'd I do? All right, now let me just start by saying that I love this filmmaker. I love Ebuka Njoku from when I watched Yahoo Plus. Now, Yahoo Plus was one of the first, in fact, I think it was the first video I filmed for my channel, but it ended up not being the first one I posted. And since then, my attitude has been, he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Is that scriptural? I don't know. Anyway, I was excited to see that this filmmaker was making another movie, and I've been on the lookout. So let's see if my anticipation and excitement have been justified. My impression throughout is that this movie is a little bit slice of life style storytelling, but without fully committing to the form, which, to be clear, that's not a criticism, it's just a comment. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. I'll do my best not to give away anything important. That's not usually the easiest thing to do, but I'll make a good stab at it. This movie begins with our protagonist, Junior, on his way to his family home in Enugu. We quickly understand that he's very anxious to be back and is only doing this on the urging of his fiancée. Back home, his mom is expressing frustration at the daughter, that's his younger sister Ada, who's refusing to get married. We're also introduced to other members of the family, a dad, a brother, and another very young sister. Junior is received with mixed reactions, and slowly the plot unfolds as we learn more about why he left, how things have been since he left, and the cost of estrangement on everyone. The question that runs a through line throughout is if the bonds of family are strong enough to overcome decades-old hurt and bitterness. There are also two love stories running concurrently, and with one, the question is if love does indeed conquer all. One last thing here. Ebuka Njoku is obsessed with the subject of Ron's girls. It's very fascinating because, I mean, that was the whole thing in Yahoo Plus, right? Now let's get straight to it, guys. What worked? The first thing I'm going to say is that this movie was experimental in many ways with its cinematography. That didn't always work, but for the most part, I'd say it did, and it was definitely interesting to see. There were a lot of these roving camera shots and angles, and just also tracking, and then interesting framing. There were a lot of odd choices. Whether or not I agreed with all of them, they definitely were interesting. So I know that we had, you know, it's almost impossible to not make certain comparisons between this movie and Yahoo Plus, but I'll keep in mind mind that this is the movie we're reviewing. Now, the soundtrack was mostly Keezyto's music, and it was quite good. It was enjoyable. It played very much in the background. But other than the soundtrack, now, I could have asked him if what I received as a screener was a final cut, because if it was, then this is a remarkably quiet film. There's barely a score. You know, that's not a bad thing. I mean, the score has its place, right, in filmmaking, but the lack of a score still sometimes, in fact, if anything, I've seen more places where maybe they should have refrained from using a score. Production design was decent. This movie has a better budget, I could immediately tell, and expansiveness than Yahoo Plus, and so I really enjoyed seeing the various sets and locations. Even though the family house is the main set, each individual set is distinct, and the various bedrooms, living areas, even the outdoor spaces, and so it had the general effect of making it feel a bit more expansive, and it didn't feel small or cramped or cheap in any way. There was really great wall art. I enjoyed the art and the decor, and also it all felt very specific to the individuals that occupied those spaces. Costume and makeup are also really good in this movie. My favorite single item of clothing, or you could call it an accessory, those glasses that never left Gozier's face. Gozier is Junior's younger brother, and this movie, there's a lot of attention to detail that I like. The cast of this movie is really good. Let's do a quick run through of the actors and the characters that they play. We have Nkem Owoh in the character of the father, that's Uzuakundu. He's not the Nkem Owoh that you always see, you know, the just comedic figure. There was a little bit of that, but he was so immersed in the story, so he was really good in this role. I enjoyed his performance. Almost all his scenes were really funny. This movie it had chuckles here and there, and honestly it got funnier as it progressed. We have Jennifer Eliogu as Deaconess. She's the mom and also Uzuakundu's wife. This actress, first of all, she's beautiful. I love her. I love the way she speaks. I've always loved her dialogue delivery. She played this role so wonderfully. She was so vulnerable and just so empathetic, and she just gave that whole courage and vibe of someone who's trying their best against all odds to hold on to their principles, but also to be fair to everyone. She carried this performance so well. Keezyto is the protagonist of this movie, and that's Junior. First of all, Keezyto is such a good looking guy, and he's always easy on the eyes to see on screen, so that's already a plus. But he's also a really good actor. He knows how to carry nuance so well. He knows how to flip his expressions, the tone within a scene. He's very expressive, you know, but he's never overly dramatic or anything like that. So I enjoyed him in this movie. Tomi Ojo played the character of Rukayat, that's Junior's fiance, and she's beautiful, first of all, but also she gave just such a great performance. So the performances were really strong. We have Sophie Chisom as Ada, that's Junior's younger sister. Her acting could have been better, but she was okay, you know, for this role. Then we have Abayomi Alvin as friend of the family, or Junior's friend. I usually like him in general, but specific to this movie, I'll come to him later. DJ Capello as Gozier, that's the younger brother. He was okay as well. Another person that I might remark on later. And then we had the little girl, Chimamanda Ukwueze, who played the character of Neoma, just called Hanne. And that is such a beautiful kid. And I love watching this little, because there was a time when we just could not find any young people to do any kind of acting, you know, so it's not amazing yet, but they do really good, and I thought that she did really good, and she's also very beautiful. So I'm just looking forward to seeing her grow, you know, and develop in the craft. And then of course we had our usual sneak performance by Lorenzo Menakaya. He made a small appearance as a cab driver, and that made me smile because he did something similar in Yahoo Plus. I don't think we saw him at all. I think he was just the voice on the phone. All right, let's get to the story. This movie has a simple story for which I've already given you the basic outline, so the rest is just details. It does stay committed to this simplicity throughout. The narrative is enjoyable. The main conflict, which is the theme of estrangement and reconnection, is established almost right away. The plot stays fresh though by constantly creating intrigue, making suggestions about secrets that are yet to come to light. And so even when the pace slows down, and slow down it does, you stay to find out what's being teased and and what's coming. There are quite a few setups with really good payoffs. There are quite a lot of also real and poignant emotions on display that also feel very familiar, and there's a nice little reveal towards the end that has also been teased throughout the movie. I do wish though that particular plot point or reveal had been given more room to breathe, but still it did work. My favorite thing, which I don't see too often in our movies, is how many scenes turn on their own value. It's always so satisfying to see that, and we had quite a bit of that in this movie. Exposition, now there was a bit of it and I'll come to that, but whenever we see it in this movie, it's used really effectively. The characters are established early in a way that their actions feel predictable, and so you feel like you know them, and then nothing that they do is really jarring or takes you by surprise. And that also makes me feel very safe with a movie when I feel like I can tell. That's not to say that there's no room for surprises, but then that's just to say also that these characters were really well drawn out and established. Also, character stories are done well enough, at least as is relevant to the story that this movie is telling and just how much the scope of what this movie is trying to tackle. So I thought that was good. I like how the Biafran story has been making its way in snippets into public consciousness. A comment here, an anecdote there. The memory will be kept fresh because the effects of the Biafran War are still very much present today. And so whenever I see that in our movies in recent times, and we're seeing that a bit more and more, I usually like to see that. I enjoyed some subtle narratives here and there, like, you know, the way Junior's room is preserved over time. Nobody focuses on that, but it's a small thing that tells you a big story about just the love and the place that this family has preserved for him, even if he's been estranged for such a long time. Now, one final thing that Ebuka does very well with storytelling is emotional tone shift and nuance in conversations, and there is quite a lot of that in this movie. Guys, that brings us to the end of the what like section. Before we proceed, just have you liked this video? Flirt with that button. Come on, give it some love. All right, also don't forget to share, and if you're not subscribed, another reminder, what did not work. Now, as with the what worked section, I'm not going to give specifics because we're trying to be spoiler free, and so we're going to speak more broad strokes again here. This movie is slow burn if you like. The pace is unrushed, that's true, and that's not a bad thing generally, but it does drag in places and it takes a while to come to the point, so that sometimes made it difficult to stay on. In general, it was really enjoyable, but there were times when I felt like, come on, move it along, you know. There's a bit of meta narrative about acting versus real life. I'm not too sure about that. Yeah, it felt a bit much to me watching it. Some scenes could have been shot better, let's just say that way, for emotional impact. Some of the less experienced actors, and this is where I mentioned Abayomi, Alvin, and Gozie, I can't remember his name now, they could have used a bit more directing and benefited from a closer watch. All in all, the acting was really good, especially because most of the actors are very experienced, but there were also some there's room for improvement, let's say. The editing in this movie is questionable. There's some transitions that are really abrupt that can be a bit jarring. There's also quite a bit of exposition, like I've already said. For the most part, as I've said, it's effective, but there are also instances when it's a bit just too much, and that's also something that we remarked upon a great deal with Yahoo Plus. Now, there's a particular scene where the character sort of breaks the fourth wall, except that there's no point to it. You're asking, why is this happening, where it's happening, and how it's happening, and the topic. And I had a similar question, you know, with some of the choices in Yahoo Plus that made me conclude that those choices were a wee bit, let's just say, pretentious because they were not justified. And that's how I also felt about that particular scene where the character broke the fourth wall. Something also that Ebuka does is use film to overtly propose and dispute certain personal philosophies or narratives. Now, let's be clear. Every film does this, or every film should do this, because that's called your worldview or your value statement. Sometimes you hear me ask in reviews, so what is this movie saying? That's what this movie is saying. However, when it's done as overtly as Ebuka does it, it's risky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It worked in Yahoo Plus because not only was it specific and focused to the theme and the plot of the movie, was tied inextricably to the plot, and so it worked and it didn't feel extraneous. It wasn't done as well here. The narratives are a bit on the nose, a bit didactic, a tad obvious, and it just feels as though certain scenarios and conversations are contrived specifically so that those tidbits or pearls of wisdom can be dropped, and that tends to take you out of the experience if you're not reeled back in very quickly. There are some storylines that are teased in cloak and dagger fashion, sort of using exposition, which those are storylines that did have the potential to be fully fleshed subplots, but then they're resolved very quickly, which I think they could have benefited from just getting fleshed out. And then the issue I had with that is that this time that is taken from those stories is now allocated to some other storylines that I don't really care about. For instance, a certain love story. A lot of time is dedicated to this love story that I just could not get myself interested in. The two characters in this particular love story, because I said there were two love stories running concurrently, right? Actually, there are three love stories in this movie. There are three love stories. When you watch it, you'll understand what I mean. For this particular love story that I'm talking about, the two characters are a bit flat. The storyline feels like a distraction. The chemistry is unconvincing, and I don't believe that the male actor in that scenario is right for that role. And so, like I said, that is not a big subplot. It did take up significant space, but that's not the totality of the movie. It's just one part that I really did not enjoy and I could have done without. Also, there are some elements of the filmmaking that just feel indulgent, and you could choose to look at it as Ebuka putting like his signature style on his film, but I said what I said. I had again that similar criticism for Yahoo Plus. All right, a final thing that I wasn't crazy about is a statement made by a character, and quote, "Secular humanists don't believe in the concept of right and wrong." What? Say? I'm a secular humanist, and without any religious frame of reference, that is literally all we rely on, which is a working concept of right and wrong. You know what I mean? So it was very odd to hear a character say that. I feel like who this character is describing is perhaps an anarchist, not a secular humanist. But, that's just a little, that's a peeve, I guess. Nitpick, I don't know, but it means something to me. In conclusion, this was a really good watch. I was entertained. I did enjoy this movie. I stayed hooked trying to find out what was still being kept hidden, what was to come, and that's something that Ebuka does really well, that even when his movies do slow down, there have been enough snippets dropped here and there that make you stay on because you know that there's something coming ahead and you're hooked. And I think that that's a brilliant strategy for storytelling. There's a certain earthiness and tenderness to the family story in this movie. The tensions never feel especially urgent or existential, but they are very much so poignant because of how familiar they feel. This is very much a family story, right? And we all come from families, and if your family is scandal-free, problem-free, conflict-free, all of the things free, you're fortunate. Mine wasn't for a long time. We had a lot of things to grapple with growing up at a certain point, just many families. And then, sometimes there's all kinds of things that you want to resolve as a family, things you want to protect from the outside world. Sometimes it's secrets. Sometimes it's secrets that hurt people within the family or secrets that hurt people outside the family. Family can be tough, let's just say it that way. And this movie was very much just sort of a flash, a portrayal of what family tensions can feel like, where people genuinely do care about each other, but the tensions are very real. And so this movie, I found it to be very relatable. This movie is also very much in keeping with what Ebuka is establishing as his tone and style. There are a number of specific nods and references to Yahoo Plus, like I've already said, like overt foreshadowing, but specifically using dialogue, common themes and references. And if you did watch Yahoo Plus, when you watch this movie, you identify them immediately, you see them. So go watch this film in the cinema. It's out now, like I said, starting May 17th. Who would enjoy this movie? If you like evenly paced, heartfelt family drama with lots of emotion, more than a hint of realism, beautiful people, and mostly really good acting. I love how beautifully it ends and how everything is tied together. Towards the end, I got nervous because I was like, these are really big things that you've thrown out here and we're getting to the end. How are you going to resolve them? And whenever I see that happen, I'm usually anxious because I'm like, there's there's not enough time for you to deal with. But then just with a sleight of hand and with incredible craft, he managed to tie all of these things together in a way that made sense and was so satisfying at the end. And so yes, I loved the ending and I did not expect to. In general, I love how carefully, humanely, and empathetically Ebuka writes and handles his characters. There's always a fine balance between recognizing the fuck-upness, I don't know, of reality, but also he gives a lot of grace, and we could all use a bit of grace. Ebuka's characters are not characters. They are human. They feel very human, you know, in all the just the beauty and the ugliness and flawsome that is humanity, you know, and this is something that will make me continue to be an ardent fan of his work. This story is ultimately about forgiveness and tolerance. I promise you, the last 10 minutes or so of this movie make everything worth it. I was worried, like I said, you know, about the resolution, but it was inspired and ended up really beautiful. I recommend this movie, and that is my final word. It's in the cinemas right now, so go see it. It's definitely worth your time. That's it for Uno the F in family, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this video has been of value to you, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and please check out my other videos. I'd like to hear your thoughts, so please, I'd like to hear your comments. You know, write your comments in the comment section. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Ebuka and Njoku. We didn't know each other, but he was so gracious to extend me a screener, and I hope by the end of this review he's not thinking, girl, that's why nobody gives you screeners. Okay guys, I don't know if I can promise a short version of this particular review. I'm really stretched for time today. I have to film another review before I'm done, and I also have to go somewhere, so I don't know if I do a short version. It may be, there are two options. It may be I do it on a different day, which means I'll look different, which nobody cares about. Or it may be I'll wait to do the short version when the movie finally gets on the streaming platform. So then it will be sort of a supplement to this longer review and a reminder to people to come check this one out. Also, you guys, tell me what you've been watching in the comment section. I'd like to hear what you're all watching. What have I been watching? Let me see. I'll write a list in the comment section. Maybe you have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Bye.